The access road to Blackwater Mine hadn't seen maintenance in years. I counted 3 potholes deep enough to swallow a tire before I stopped counting altogether. My headlights carved yellow tunnels through the West Virginia darkness as the sedan bounced and scraped along the final quarter-mile to the guardhouse. The night shift posting had come with minimal information. Security work for Halcyon Mining Corporation, graveyard shift, good pay, and minimal interaction required. The last part had sealed the deal for me. After 2 years of retail security in Charleston with its endless parade of shoplifters and lost children, isolation sounded perfect. I parked beside a mud-spattered pickup that had to be 20 years old. The guardhouse, a single-story cinder-block building with metal-framed windows, squatted at the mouth of the mine entrance. A single fluorescent light flickered above the steel door. The lock stuck when I tried my key. I jiggled it twice, then gave the door a practiced hip check. It swung open with a whine that echoed across the empty lot. "You're on time. That's something." The voice came from a desk at the far end of a narrow hallway. A man in his late 50s looked up from a dog-eared paperback. His beard was more salt than pepper, and deep lines bracketed his mouth like parentheses. "David Martinez," I said, extending my hand, "reporting for first shift." He took my hand with calloused fingers. "Robert Kelly. I run security here." His grip was firm but brief, like he was rationing contact. "Been here 15 years. I glanced around at the sparse room. A row of metal lockers lined one wall. A coffee maker that had seen better days occupied a small table. 2 closed-circuit monitors showed grainy black and white views of the mine entrance and what looked like an equipment shed. "Thought this place was abandoned," I said. Robert pulled open a drawer and removed a laminated card about the size of an index card. "Officially, yes. 1978 was the last active operation. Company maintains minimal security to prevent trespassing and equipment theft." He held the card out to me. "These are the rules, not guidelines. Rules." I took it, expecting standard security protocols. Instead, I found a numbered list in bold type. 1. Always bring spare clothes. 2. Place extra boots outside your door while resting. 3. Never remove your helmet while in the tunnels. 4. Never look directly at stars while waiting for morning shuttle. I looked up, waiting for the punchline. Robert's face remained impassive, eyes steady on mine. "This some kind of hazing ritual?" I asked. "You follow every one of those rules, you make it to sunrise." He tapped the card with a blunt finger. "You don't, I'll be calling in a replacement tomorrow." The fluorescent light buzzed overhead. Outside, wind pushed against the building with a low moan. "I'm serious, Martinez. You think it's bullshit, fine. But you follow them anyway." I pocketed the card. "All right." Robert nodded once, satisfied. "Locker 7 is yours. Combinations 1437. Uniform, equipment, helmet are inside. First rounds start at 10. I'll walk you through the route." The standard security uniform fit well enough. Dark blue shirt with the Halcyon logo, black pants, steel-toed boots. I clipped the radio to my belt and adjusted the flashlight holster. The helmet looked more substantial than I expected, with a powerful mounted light and reinforced shell. "The spare clothes?" I asked, closing the locker. Robert pointed to a duffel bag near the door. "Put those in your locker. Complete set. Don't forget." I almost argued, but remembered the card in my pocket. Whatever game this was, I'd play along for the first night. I stowed the clothes and followed Robert to the mine entrance. The main tunnel yawned like an open throat, concrete reinforced for the first 100 feet before giving way to raw stone. Cool air flowed outward, carrying the smell of wet earth and something else I couldn't identify. "Route's simple," Robert said, flicking on his helmet light. "Main tunnel to the first junction. Right tunnel to maintenance bay. Left tunnel to the old offices. Check all doors secure, note any water ingress, sign the logbooks at each checkpoint. Should take about 90 minutes if you keep moving." I activated my own light, surprised by its intensity. The beam cut through the darkness with almost surgical precision. "What exactly am I looking for?" I asked. Robert's expression didn't change. Anything that doesn't belong. We walked the route once together. Robert pointed out checkpoints, explained the logbook procedure, showed me the old maintenance bay with its rusted equipment. Everything looked exactly as you'd expect in an abandoned mine, dusty, forgotten, untouched. Nothing that justified cryptic rules or ominous warnings. At 11, Robert left me to handle the rest of the shift alone. "I'll be at the guardhouse until 5, he said. "Radio check every hour. You get into trouble, 3 clicks on the radio. No exceptions." I nodded, already planning how I'd tell this story to my buddies back in Charleston. The paranoid old security guard and his bizarre rules for guarding an empty hole in the ground. The first hour passed uneventfully. I completed my initial rounds, signed the logbooks, and reported back to the surface. Nothing to note except the unnatural quiet. Mines have a particular silence, a dense absence of sound that presses against your eardrums. At midnight, I started my second round. I was halfway to the maintenance bay when I noticed the first anomaly, a smudge of coal dust on my sleeve. I brushed at it, but instead of coming off, it seemed to spread. I checked my gloves, but they were clean. By the time I reached the maintenance bay, both sleeves were grimed with black dust, as if I'd been leaning against coal seams. My pants showed the same gritty coating below the knees. I checked surfaces around me, ran a finger along a nearby equipment shelf. Nothing. The dust wasn't coming from any contact I was making. "Weird," I muttered, the word swallowed by the tunnel. I completed the checkpoint and turned toward the left tunnel. Each step seemed to add another layer of grime to my uniform. By the time I finished rounds at 1 in the morning, my clean uniform looked like I'd spent hours crawling through coal seams. The fabric felt heavy, damp in places where no water should be. Back at the guardhouse, I radioed in to Robert. "Rounds complete. All secure. Uniform status?" His voice crackled through the small speaker. I looked down at myself. Filthy. Don't know how it happened. "Check your locker," was all he said. The spare clothes I'd stowed earlier remained perfectly clean, not a smudge or spot on them. I changed quickly, stuffing the inexplicably soiled uniform into a plastic bag. The clean fabric felt noticeably lighter against my skin. I showered in the small bathroom, watching black water swirl down the drain, though I couldn't account for where all the grime had come from. My skin underneath had remained clean. Only the uniform had been affected. At 1:30, I settled into the small rest area for my break. A narrow cot, a mini fridge, and a desk lamp furnished the space. The second rule on the card nagged at me. Place extra boots outside your door while resting. "This is ridiculous," I said to the empty room. Still, I took the extra pair of boots from my duffel and set them neatly outside my door before closing it. I stretched out on the cot, setting my watch alarm for 2 hours. Sleep came quicker than expected in the quiet building. I drifted off to the soft hum of the mini fridge and distant wind. The sound that woke me wasn't my alarm. Heavy footsteps moved down the hallway outside my door. Deliberate, measured steps of work boots on concrete. I checked my watch. 2:07 in the morning. I sat up slowly, hand moving to the flashlight beside the cot. The footsteps paused outside my door. No shadow showed in the crack beneath, just silence, then the distinct sound of something being lifted from the floor. The steps moved away, heavier now, with an odd, dragging quality to them. I waited 5 full minutes before opening the door. The hallway stretched empty in both directions. The boots I'd placed outside were gone. My radio crackled. "Checkpoint," Robert's voice came through, flat and unsurprised. "All clear," I responded automatically, though nothing felt clear about what had just happened. I completed my 3 a.m. rounds wearing my second uniform, which remained pristine despite traveling the same tunnels as before. Whatever had soiled my first set of clothes seemed to have no interest in the spares. When I returned to the guardhouse at 4:30, pale dawn light had begun to filter through the high windows. Robert sat at the desk, a fresh pot of coffee steaming beside him. "You made it," he said, pouring 2 cups. "What exactly happened to my boots?" I asked, accepting the coffee. Robert gestured toward the door. "Check for yourself." Outside my room, where I'd left my clean black boots, sat a pair of mud-caked mining boots. They were at least 2 sizes larger than mine, the leather cracked with age, metal eyelets green with corrosion. A faded name was still visible along the inner edge of the right boot. "Harkins." "Jesus," I whispered. "First rule keeps the mind from claiming you as one of its own," Robert said, sipping his coffee. "Second rule gives them something else to take." "Them?" Robert's weathered face showed the ghost of a smile. "You'll learn more tonight. Shift's over at 6. Might want to check outside your door again before you leave." I did as he suggested. The ancient boots had vanished, replaced by my own clean pair, arranged nearly side by side as though they'd never been moved. As I changed into my street clothes, Robert's warning about the rules started making terrible sense. Whatever game I'd thought I was playing had real stakes, and I was just beginning to understand the rules. The mine tunnels narrowed as I made my way deeper into the 3rd checkpoint. My boots left clear prints in the damp clay floor, the earlier set still visible from my first round. Temperature dropped the further I went, probably 45 degrees now, breath visible in the beam of my helmet light. The air smelled different down here too, stagnant water, rusting metal, and something else, something organic. I checked my watch. 2:35 in the morning. 3 hours into my second night shift at Blackwater Mine. The maintenance bay checkpoint had been clean, logbook notation perfect, everything in its place. Nothing out of the ordinary except for the silence. That dense, waiting quality to the air that made the hair on my neck stand up. The beam from my helmet caught dust motes swirling in patterns that didn't match any air current I could feel. They drifted in tight spirals, almost like they were following an invisible finger tracing circles in the darkness. I logged the time at the 3rd checkpoint, a small alcove with a metal box bolted to the stone wall. My handwriting looked steady in the log despite the cold making my fingers stiff. Whoever had signed before me, Robert, presumably, had made his entry exactly 24 hours earlier. The left tunnel stretched ahead, ceiling dropping another foot or so. I had to crouch slightly now, the rough-hewn rock occasionally brushing my helmet. Water trickled somewhere to my right, the hollow plink-plink marking seconds like a metronome. The first flicker of my helmet light was so brief I nearly missed it. A quick stutter, then back to full brightness. The second flicker lasted half a second. The third left me in darkness for a full 2 beats of my heart. I stopped moving, tapped the light housing with my knuckles. It came back on. "Batteries," I muttered, remembering the spares in my pocket. 4 double A's wrapped in plastic. The light went out completely. Darkness in a mine isn't like regular darkness. It's absolute, consuming. My hand disappeared 6 inches from my face. The world contracted to what I could touch and hear. I reached for the spare batteries, fingers closing around the plastic package in my pocket. Then I remembered Rule 3. Never remove your helmet while in the tunnels. My thumb brushed against the battery compartment at the back of the helmet. Opening it meant taking the helmet off, breaking the rule. I hesitated, listening to my own breathing bounce off the close walls. Something else was breathing too, low and ragged, coming from further down the tunnel. Not wind, not machinery. Too wet, too organic. The sound of lungs that hadn't worked in a very long time, struggling to pull in air. I backed up a step. My boot heel connected with something soft that hadn't been there before. The breathing stopped. Something substantial shifted its weight 20 feet ahead, creating a sound like gravel sliding down a slope. Heavy, deliberate, moving toward me. I kept backing up, one hand on the wall for guidance, the other still gripping the useless light housing. The wall felt different under my fingers, no longer rough stone, but something closer to wet fabric. It yielded slightly under pressure, cold and slick. The grinding noise grew closer. 15 feet. 10. I gripped my helmet with both hands and struck it against the wall, not hard enough to crack it, just a solid impact against the light housing. The bulb flickered weakly, catching the edge of something pale and curved like a rib before going dark again. I hit it harder. Once. Twice. On the third strike, the light surged back to life, filling the tunnel with harsh white illumination. For a fraction of a second, maybe a quarter of a second, I saw them. 3 figures in decomposing mining coveralls, fabric hanging in strips from skeletal frames, hands with too many joints reaching toward me, empty eye sockets in gray-green faces, mouths frozen in permanent screams. Then nothing. The tunnel stretched empty before me, water still dripping steadily from the ceiling. I didn't run. Running in a mine is how people die. But I moved faster than regulation pace back through the checkpoints, helmet light blazing steady now, eyes checking every alcove and shadow. Nothing followed me that I could see. Nothing made sound beyond my own footsteps and the constant mineral seepage. Robert was waiting at the guardhouse when I returned at 4:15, 2 cups of coffee steaming on the desk. His eyes moved from my face to my helmet, then to my hands, which I realized were trembling slightly. "Light went out," I said, settling into the chair across from him. He pushed a cup toward me. "Third checkpoint?" I nodded, wrapping cold fingers around the warm mug. "How'd you know?" "Same place it happens to everyone." He leaned back, chair creaking under his weight. "What did you see?" The coffee tasted terrible, burnt and bitter. I drank it anyway, letting the heat work through me. 3 miners, skeletal, reaching. Robert nodded as if I'd confirmed the weather forecast. 37 miners died here in 1978. Official report says tunnel collapse. 8 bodies recovered. 29 still down there somewhere. That's 37 total, I noted. Good math. His mouth twitched in what might have been a smile. "You think I'm running a skeleton crew here by accident?" I set my mug down. "You're saying what I saw was real. I'm saying follow the rules and you live to collect a paycheck." Robert pulled a folder from his desk drawer and slid it across to me. "Halcyon Mining Corporation maintains one-night watchmen at all closed facilities. Officially, we're here to prevent equipment theft and vandalism." Inside the folder was a contract with my signature standard security guard paperwork. Beneath it lay a second document on thick yellowed paper, written in language that read more like an exorcism than a job description. "We're not security guards," I said, closing the folder. "We're containment." Robert's weathered face gave nothing away. "The dead don't leave. Not these ones. Government sealed the mine after recovery operations found conditions unsuitable for continued extraction. That's bureaucrat talk for shit got weird and we're burying it." "Why keep it open at all? Why not collapse the entrance?" I asked. "They tried that in 1982. Robert sipped his coffee. By 1984, half the town of Beckley was reporting home invasions where nothing got taken. Cold spots in houses built over old mining roads. Children with imaginary friends who knew things about tunnel work from the 30s. I thought about the skeletal hands reaching through darkness. "So we're keeping them contained. Down there." Robert nodded. "Your helmet never fails by accident. The light goes out when they want it to. They test everyone who takes this job. And the 4th rule? About the stars?" For the first time, genuine emotion crossed Robert's face. Something between fear and resignation. "You've got about an hour before the morning shuttle arrives. Plenty of time to finish paperwork." He changed the subject after that, walking me through incident reports and the proper way to log maintenance requests. Professional, practical talk that never circled back to what lived in the mine or why the dead miners would want to reach for me in the darkness. When my shift ended at 6, I understood I wasn't just punching a clock for halcyon mining. I was holding a line between the living and the restless dead, between ordinary darkness and something hungry that lived within it. The paperwork named it a security position, but the rules told the truth. I was a barrier, and barriers only exist where something needs containing. I clocked out at 6 in the morning, bones tired in that particular way night shifts leave you. The logbooks were signed, rounds completed, and my second pair of boots, the ones that hadn't been stolen by whatever walked the corridors at night, were laced tight for the walk to the shuttle pickup. Robert watched me gather my things, leaning against the doorframe of the guardhouse office. "Shuttle runs 10 minutes late sometimes," he said. "Weather and road conditions." I nodded, shouldering my duffel. My street clothes smelled like home. Laundry detergent, normal life. A stark contrast to the mine's perpetual damp earth and metal reek that had settled into my uniform. "I'll wait outside," I said. "Morning air might clear my head." Robert's hand caught the door before I could push through. "Remember Rule 4? The laminated card was still in my pocket, edges already softening from handling. I didn't need to check it. Never look directly at stars while waiting for morning shuttle. He studied my face a moment too long, then let his hand fall. Good enough. Outside, pre-dawn light painted the eastern horizon in thin bands of gray. The air hung cold and still, somewhere around 38 degrees. No birds yet, no insects. Just the low mechanical hum of the mine's ventilation system and my own footsteps crunching across gravel. I settled on a concrete parking bumper at the edge of the lot. My watch read 6:07. The shuttle usually arrived between 6:15 and 6:20 to take night shift workers to the motel in Beckley, where most of us stayed. Sleep tugged at my eyelids. I'd seen the dead miners last night. Real or not, the experience had drained me. I still felt the weight of those empty eye sockets tracking my movements, the impossibly dry sound of bone fingers scraping against stone. A peculiar quiet had fallen. The ventilation system had cycled off, leaving the kind of silence that feels like pressure against your eardrums. I focused on keeping my eyes at horizon level, watching the access road for headlights. That's when I noticed the first unusual thing. No dew on the gravel. Despite the cold morning, every stone lay bone dry. The second anomaly followed immediately. The air around me had stopped moving entirely. No breeze, no temperature variation. Like being suspended in amber. Above, something glimmered. The sky wasn't fully dark anymore, but it wasn't light either. That perfect liminal space between night and dawn, where stars should be fading. Except these particular points of light seemed to be growing brighter. My chin tilted upward before I could catch myself. They weren't stars. Dozens of pale blue-white lights hung above the tree line in perfect geometric formation. Too orderly, too uniform, and definitely getting larger. I dropped my gaze immediately, heart hammering against my ribs. Rule 4. I'd just broken Rule 4. The lights pulsed once, twice, like synchronized heartbeats. Then they began to descend. They moved like embers falling from a great height, but with deliberate precision. No random drifting, no natural pattern. The formation maintained perfect spacing as it dropped lower, each light now clearly separate from the others. A sound started, high and thin at first, building steadily until I recognized it. Metal scraping against stone, multiplied a dozen times over, like knives being sharpened or picks dragging across rock. I stood slowly, keeping my eyes fixed on the access road. Don't look up. Don't acknowledge them. But I could feel them now. A prickling sensation across my scalp, a weight pressing down from above. The first wash of heat hit the back of my neck. Not fire hot, but fever hot. The unnatural warmth of infection. It grew steadily more intense until my skin felt tight and my collar damp with sweat. The scraping sound closed in from all sides. I abandoned protocol and broke into a run, boots pounding against gravel as I sprinted back toward the guardhouse. The heat chased me, building until the air around me wavered like asphalt in summer. Something swept past my left ear, a concussive whoosh of superheated air that smelled like copper and burnt hair. Another brushed my right shoulder, leaving a perfect circle of numbness in its wake. The guardhouse door appeared ahead, still shut. I slammed my palm against it once, twice. It swung open. Robert's weathered hand shot out, grabbed my shirt collar, and yanked me inside with surprising strength. The door banged shut behind me, lock engaging with a solid click. "Down," he ordered, shoving me below window level. I dropped to the concrete floor, lungs burning, skin crawling with the memory of that unnatural heat. Robert crouched beside me, one hand pressed against the door, the other gripping a small leather pouch. "Did they touch you?" His voice was taut, professional. "No, close but no." Outside, the scraping sound circled the building, once, twice, 3 times, like a predator testing barriers. Robert watched through the narrow gap between window blinds, his face illuminated by pulsing blue-white light. "What the hell are they?" I asked, keeping my voice low. "Old as the mountain," he answered without looking away. "Maybe older." The light outside intensified, casting hard-edged shadows through the blinds. They stretched across the floor like prison bars, then shrank as the source moved higher. "They're leaving," Robert said. "Back to their holding pattern." I pulled myself up using the desk edge, legs still unsteady. Through the window, I could see the lights ascending in the same perfect formation, receding until they were again just points against the lightening sky. "You looked up," Robert said. Not a question. "I didn't mean to." He grunted, pocketing the leather pouch. "Nobody ever does." The room felt 10 degrees warmer than it should have. I shed my jacket, noticed a perfect circle burned through the right shoulder, fabric edges cauterized black, no fraying. "The miners below aren't the only things haunting this place," Robert said, moving to the coffee pot. He filled it with water, measured grounds with practiced precision. "Something else watches from above. Has been for generations. Watches for what? Acknowledgement." He flipped the switch, and the coffee maker gurgled to life. "You don't look at something, truly look at it, unless you believe it exists. Once you do that, you've invited it in." I thought about the perfect formation, the deliberate descent. They knew I was there. They were hunting. Robert nodded. "First week I worked here, I nearly died the same way. Thought the stars looked strange. Learned my lesson quick." He poured 2 cups when the coffee finished brewing, handed me one. This morning's batch tasted better than yesterday's. Less burnt, more actual coffee flavor. "The mine disaster in 1978, he said after a long silence. "Official report says tunnel collapse. Reality was messier." "The miners were running from something," I said, the realization hitting me as I spoke. "From those lights." Robert gestured toward the ceiling. They'd been hunting the night crews for weeks, picking them off one by one during shift changes. The miners figured they'd be safer underground than exposed on the surface. I remembered the skeletal figures in the tunnels, their grasping hands. They were wrong. They were trapped, Robert corrected. The things above can't go below ground. Something about the earth itself keeps them out. But once the miners were cornered down there with no way out, he let the sentence hang. The implications settled over me like the fine coal dust that had coated my first uniform. So the mine itself is actually a sanctuary. From them. "If you follow the rules," Robert said. "The clothes, the boots, the helmet, all that keeps the dead miners from claiming you as one of their own. But the last rule keeps the things above from marking you as prey," I finished. He nodded once, approving. "The company knows. Has since the beginning. That's why there's always been a night watchman here. Someone to maintain the balance." Through the window, normal dawn had finally broken. Pale sunlight spilled across the parking lot, revealing nothing unusual, just gravel, scraggly mountain vegetation, and the winding access road. The shuttle's headlights appeared in the distance, bouncing along the uneven terrain. "You still want the job?" Robert asked, watching me. I thought about the miners below, forever trapped in darkness, the entities above, forever hunting, the thin line between them where humans like me and Robert stood guard. "Yeah," I said, "I do." He seemed satisfied with that, though nothing in his expression changed. "Tomorrow night we go deeper. There's someone you need to meet." The shuttle pulled up outside, engine idling. I gathered my things, careful not to look up at the now innocent morning sky. Robert caught my arm as I reached for the door. "Remember what you learned today. The rules aren't just for you. They're for everyone in Beckley. Everyone who lives within range of this place." I stepped outside into normal morning light, feeling the weight of invisible eyes tracking my movement all the way to the shuttle door. Something told me they'd be waiting tomorrow night. They'd always be waiting now. The rules weren't just a job requirement. They were survival. I checked my watch. 11:17 at night. My third shift at Blackwater Mine had started just over an hour ago. The cinderblock walls of the maintenance bay felt damper than before, water beading where the ceiling met the walls, temperature holding steady at 42 degrees. A new drip had formed near checkpoint 2, steady and rhythmic, forming a puddle roughly 8 inches in diameter. I marked it in the logbook, noting date, time, and approximate flow rate. Just another detail, just another shift. "East tunnel flooded beyond marker 37, I reported over the radio. "Water's about 3 inches deep and rising." Robert's voice crackled back. "Expected this time of year. Stay clear of it." The deeper sections were my last checkpoint, the third tunnel junction where I'd encountered the miners 2 nights ago. I'd spent my off hours researching the 1978 disaster, finding little beyond sanitized news reports and a memorial plaque in Beckley listing 37 names. I clicked my helmet light twice, testing it. The beam cut strong and steady through the darkness. Fresh batteries installed before my shift, spares in my pocket. I wouldn't make the same mistake again. The tunnel narrowed as I descended, ceiling dropping to where my helmet occasionally brushed rock. The air changed too, colder, heavier with mineral content. My breath fogged in the light beam. Water trickled somewhere out of sight, a constant background noise that masked other sounds. Checkpoint 3 came into view, the metal box gleaming dully in my light. I opened it with my key, checked the previous entry, Robert's signature from the night before, then signed my own name and noted the time. 12:22 a.m. That's when I heard it, not dripping water, not settling rock. A scraping sound, methodical and purposeful, like something hard drawn across stone. Once, twice, 3 times. Then silence. I kept the beam pointed at the logbook, focusing on finishing my entry. When I closed the box, I deliberately swept the light in a wide arc, illuminating the tunnel ahead. Nothing, just rough-hewn rock and timber supports. The scraping started again, this time from behind me. I turned slowly, tracking my light across the empty tunnel. "Hello?" The beam flickered once, a brief stutter that sent my pulse racing. It stabilized, then dimmed to half strength before surging back to normal. The air temperature dropped suddenly, my next breath creating a thick cloud that hung, suspended before my face. The light went out completely. I slapped the housing, remembering how it had worked before. Nothing. Darkness closed in, absolute and consuming. I reached for the spare batteries in my pocket, then froze. Rule 3. Never remove your helmet while in the tunnels. The scraping sounds multiplied, coming from all directions now. Not random, coordinated, like multiple tools working in unison. I backed against the checkpoint box, mentally mapping my escape route. My helmet light clicked back on without my touching it. They stood in a semicircle, blocking my path back to the surface. 7 figures in decomposing mining coveralls, some little more than skeletons with scraps of fabric clinging to bone, others more recently dead with gray-green flesh stretched tight over skulls, empty eye sockets fixed on me, mouths hanging open in silent screams. One stepped forward, taller than the others, coveralls less degraded, a name patch still visible. Harkins. The same name that had been on those ancient boots left outside my door. "I need to continue my rounds," I said, keeping my voice steady. They didn't react, didn't move, just stood watching me with those empty sockets. I remembered what had happened last time, how they'd vanished when my light returned. This time they remained solid, unmoved by the beam. Harkins took another step forward. His hand, mostly bone with strips of desiccated tissue, extended toward me. I backed away, moving deeper into the tunnel rather than trying to push past them. "I'm not meant to be here," I said, uncertain why I was speaking to them. "I'm just security." Harkins tilted his head, a gesture unnervingly human. His jaw moved, making a dry clicking sound. No words came out, but I understood the message. They had been just miners once. I turned and ran deeper into the tunnel, breaking protocol but seeing no alternative. My light beam bounced wildly across the walls as I moved, catching glimpses of support beams and ancient equipment. Behind me, multiple sets of footsteps followed, not running, but moving with steady, inevitable purpose. The tunnel widened into a chamber I'd never seen before, not on any map Robert had shown me. Old mining carts sat abandoned on rusted tracks. Tools lay scattered where they'd fallen decades ago, and at the far end, a vertical shaft ascended toward the surface, rungs embedded in the rock wall. An escape route. I scrambled toward it, checking my watch. 12:47 in the morning. Dawn was hours away. The dead miners entered the chamber behind me, spreading out to block any retreat. Harkins remained at their center, his empty gaze fixed on me as I backed toward the ladder. My boot hit the first rung. I kept my light trained on the miners while climbing backward, one hand maintaining my grip. 20 feet up, another tunnel branched off, narrower but sloping upward toward what might be the surface. The miners didn't pursue up the ladder. They simply watched, heads tilted at identical angles, waiting. I reached the branch tunnel and hauled myself into it, sweeping my light across cobweb-filled darkness, disused but intact. The air felt different here, moving slightly, carrying a hint of pine and mountain night. I followed it upward, crawling in places where the ceiling dropped too low to stand. The tunnel curved, rose, then leveled out. Ahead, a faint gray rectangle appeared, moonlight filtering through what had to be an exit. Relief surged through me. I moved faster, reaching a rusted metal door that hung partially open. Cool night air slipped through the gap. I pushed through onto a small rock ledge overlooking the main mine entrance from above. The guardhouse sat 200 yards below, lights burning in the windows. Safety. Almost there. I checked the sky out of habit, keeping my gaze on the horizon. The stars appeared normal, distant pinpricks against black. A clear night, temperature in the mid-30s. My breath fogged in the air as I plotted my descent down the rocky slope. That's when I noticed. No insects chirping, no night birds, no distant machinery hum. Complete silence. I froze, suddenly aware of the exposed position I'd put myself in. The silence broke with a soft whistling sound from above, like air escaping a pressurized container. Then another, and another. I kept my eyes fixed firmly on the guardhouse below. Don't look up. Rule 4. The whistling intensified, accompanied by that now familiar metallic scraping. Heat bloomed against the back of my neck, not natural warmth, but that fever-hot sensation I'd felt during the shuttle incident. They were here, directly above me, waiting. I was trapped between two forces, dead miners below in the tunnels, sky entities above in the darkness. The realization hit me with sudden clarity. Each rule protected against a specific threat. The spare clothes prevented the mind from claiming me. The extra boots outside my door gave the wandering spirits something to interact with. The helmet light kept the underground dead at bay. Never looking at the sky prevented the surface entities from locking onto me. But I'd broken the third rule by removing my helmet to change batteries, and I'd broken the fourth by accidentally looking up 2 mornings ago. I'd compromised the delicate balance that kept me safe. The heat intensified above me, pulsing in waves. Below, the tunnel door creaked wider, bone-white fingers curling around its edge. Movement caught my eye. A figure emerging from the guardhouse, moving with purpose across the gravel lot. Robert carrying something long and slim. A shotgun. He looked up, somehow knowing exactly where I was despite the darkness. "Don't move!" he shouted, voice carrying clearly in the still air. The door behind me opened fully. Harkins stepped onto the ledge, followed by 3 other miners, their empty eyes fixed on me, jaws working silently. Above, the heat condensed into visible light, blue-white points arranging themselves in that familiar geometric pattern, descending slowly. Robert reached the base of the slope, shotgun raised. "Cover your ears!" I clamped my hands over my ears as he fired upward, once, twice, 3 times in rapid succession. The blasts echoed across the mountain, but instead of buckshot, they released clouds of white particles that hung suspended in the air. Salt. He was firing salt rounds. The lights above scattered, their perfect formation breaking apart. The heat dissipated instantly, replaced by normal mountain chill. Behind me, the miners retreated into the tunnel, bone fingers scraping against rock as they disappeared into darkness. Robert climbed toward me, reloading as he moved. "You're breaking protocols left and right tonight," he said when he reached me. No anger in his voice, just professional assessment. "They didn't disappear when my light came back on," I explained. "They kept coming." He nodded, scanning the sky. "They're learning, adapting. Both sides are. Both sides. Whatever's above and whatever's below." He gestured with the shotgun barrel. "They've been fighting over this mountain longer than people have been digging in it. We're just caught in the middle." We descended carefully, Robert leading the way. Back at the guardhouse, he locked the door behind us and laid the shotgun on his desk. Not a hunting weapon, a tactical model with custom modifications. 15 years? He said, answering my unasked question. "That's how long I've been maintaining the balance here. Started just like you, taking a security job that paid too well for what it asked." I sat across from him, still processing what had happened. The mine company knows what's here. Of course they do. He pulled a logbook from his drawer, older and thicker than the checkpoint ones. Every incident, every manifestation, every breach, it's all documented. They need to know exactly what might get loose if we fail. Get loose? Into Beckley? Robert's weathered face remained impassive, but his eyes told a different story. "Before I came on, there was a 3-month gap with no night watchman. 27 deaths in Beckley that winter. Official causes: carbon monoxide poisoning, hypothermia, heart failure. Real cause?" He tapped the logbook. "They got out." I thought about the miners reaching for me with their bone fingers, the lights descending from above with their unnatural heat. What do they want? The dead below want company. The things above want... He paused, searching for the right word. Consumption. And the rules keep them separated. He nodded. The miners can't go above ground at night because those things are hunting. Those things can't go below ground because the earth itself keeps them out. We maintain the balance by not belonging fully to either domain. Robert pulled a small leather pouch from his pocket, identical to the one he'd held during the shuttle incident. "Salt and iron filings, old protection. Works better than it should." "Why me?" I asked finally. "Why bring me into this?" He studied me for a long moment. "Because I'm 63 years old with 2 stents in my heart and arthritis in both knees, because someone needs to know all this when I can't do it anymore. Understanding settled over me. I'm your replacement, if you choose to be. He leaned back, shadows deepening the lines in his face. Not many can handle this job. Fewer still can understand why it matters. Outside, the night had returned to normal. Insects chirped. A distant owl called. The mundane sounds of an ordinary mountain evening. But I knew better now. I'd seen what waited in the darkness, both above and below. I'd felt the heat of their attention, witnessed their patient hunger. Someone had to maintain the balance. Someone had to follow the rules and keep the boundaries intact. I need to know everything, I said. All of it. Robert's expression didn't change, but something like approval flickered in his eyes. Tomorrow night, he said. There's someone you need to meet first. I arrived at the guardhouse at 10:30, half an hour before my shift officially started. Robert waited inside, a map spread across the desk and 2 steaming cups beside it. 4th night. My boots still held coal dust from yesterday's rounds, the leather already taking on the dull patina of regular use. Thought you might want to see this, Robert said, tapping the yellowed blueprint. Complete tunnel system, not just the sections in the official security manual. I studied the layout, 3 main shafts branching into dozens of smaller tunnels, ventilation corridors, maintenance bays. Most extended beneath the mountain for distances I hadn't realized possible. My rounds had covered maybe a quarter of the full system. These areas here, Robert traced a finger along a section marked with faded red ink, collapsed in 1952. 7 men lost. This junction flooded in 1965. Took 4 more. And here. He pointed to the deepest tunnel, a shaft that plunged almost vertically on the diagram, is where most of the 78 disaster happened. 29 bodies never recovered, I said, recalling my research. Robert nodded. Plus 11 more from earlier accidents that were too dangerous to retrieve, and 1 more recent. Recent? He pulled a folder from his desk drawer and removed a newspaper clipping dated 6 months earlier. The headline read, "Local historian missing, presumed lost in hiking accident." James Crawford, Robert said, 35. History professor at Beckley Community College, specialized in Appalachian mining disasters. He tapped the man's photo. Dark hair, serious eyes, academic-looking with wire-rimmed glasses. Got interested in Blackwater after finding mentions of it in old county records. Started asking questions around town. I studied the face, committing it to memory. He came here. 3 times that I know of. Caught him twice during daylight hours, escorted him off the property. 3rd time he came at night. Must have watched my routines. Waited until I was on the far side of my rounds. What happened? Robert's expression remained neutral, but his fingers tightened almost imperceptibly around his coffee cup. Security footage shows him entering the main tunnel at 1:17 in the morning. No footage of him leaving. I glanced at my watch, 10:45. 15 minutes until my shift started. You think he's still down there? In a manner of speaking. Robert folded the map deliberately, creasing each section with methodical precision. Your rounds tonight include the deep shaft, Junction D past Checkpoint 3. I need you to verify something for me. He reached under the desk and removed a canvas bag, placing it between us. Inside, a heavy flashlight with fresh batteries, a canister of rock salt, and a leather pouch identical to the one he'd used against the sky entities. The miners you've seen so far died decades ago, he said. Most are just imprints, echoes. But fresher ones, they're different, more aware, more purposeful. You think Crawford is active down there? Robert nodded once. 2 nights ago, motion sensors triggered in the deep shaft. Last night, Checkpoint 3's logbook had a new signature that wasn't mine or yours. He slid the most recent logbook across the desk. I flipped to yesterday's entry for checkpoint 3, finding my signature from my 2 a.m. rounds. Below it, in different handwriting, someone had written, J. Crawford, 3:47 a.m. Conditions unchanged. My skin prickled. Could someone else have gotten in? Doors were locked, perimeter undisturbed, security system functioning normally. Robert tapped the leather pouch. Take this with you. Salt circle if you need containment. Iron filings if he approaches too close. I placed the supplies in my utility belt and zipped my uniform jacket. Outside, the night pressed against the windows, clear and cold, stars distant pinpricks I carefully avoided looking at directly. One more thing, Robert said as I reached the door. If you hear him speak, and he will try to speak to you, remember that whatever's wearing Crawford's face isn't him anymore. Not completely. 11:37. I signed Checkpoint 1's logbook with precise strokes, noting temperature, 39 degrees, relative humidity, 82%, and water level at marker 17, 6 inches, up 1 inch from yesterday. The beam from my helmet light remained steady, batteries fresh as I'd checked them twice before descending. The tunnels felt different tonight. Not just the usual damp cold or the constant mineral smell. Something expectant hung in the air, like the pressure drop before a thunderstorm. My footsteps echoed differently, slightly muffled as though the stone itself was absorbing the sound. At checkpoint 2, I found the first anomaly. The logbook askew, not aligned with the edge of the metal box as regulations specified. The last entry showed Robert's rounds from 18 hours earlier. No unscheduled signatures. I returned the book to its proper position and continued deeper. The tunnel narrowed past checkpoint 2, ceiling height dropping to where my helmet occasionally brushed stone. Water trickled constantly from hidden sources, collecting in shallow pools that reflected my light in broken patterns. The air grew colder, 35 degrees according to my thermometer, and carried that peculiar stillness I'd come to associate with the miner's presence. I reached checkpoint 3 at 12:14, unlocked the metal box, and found the logbook open rather than closed. The last entry was mine from the previous night. Crawford's signature had vanished. Something scraped against stone behind me, a deliberate sound, not the random settling of the mountain. I turned slowly, sweeping my light across the empty tunnel. Security protocol requires you to identify yourself, I said, voice steady despite the cold weight settling in my chest. No response, but the scraping came again, this time from the junction ahead where the tunnel split into 2 branches. According to Robert's map, the left path led to the collapsed section from 1952. The right descended toward the deep shaft where the 78 disaster had occurred. I checked my watch, 12:17, then made a notation in the logbook before continuing. Protocol dictated I follow my assigned route. Left tunnel, inspect the barrier, return to junction, continue to maintenance bay, then back to the surface. The scraping came a third time, from the right tunnel, deep shaft. I hesitated, then made a decision. Investigating noise disturbance, deep shaft junction, I said into my radio. Static answered, too deep for the signal to reach the surface. The right tunnel sloped downward at a 15-degree angle. Support beams appeared older here, wood darkened with age and moisture. My light caught glints of metal, abandoned tools, rail cart tracks, the detritus of mining operations long suspended. The air grew dense with mineral content, each breath leaving a metallic aftertaste. 20 yards in, my helmet light flickered. I tapped it once, twice. The beam stabilized, then dimmed by half. Something moved at the edge of the reduced light, a human shape too solid to be a shadow. When I directed my beam toward it, nothing remained. I know you're there, I said. I've seen your signature in the logbook, Crawford. The light died completely. I reached for the backup flashlight, remembering Rule 3. Never remove your helmet in the tunnels. The darkness pressed against me, absolute and consuming. No ambient light, no adjustment of pupils possible at this depth. A voice spoke from directly ahead. Male, academic, with a slight tremor beneath the words. "You're not supposed to be here." Not threatening, almost concerned. I kept the helmet on, fumbling for the flashlight at my belt. "Neither are you, Professor Crawford," I replied, finding the flashlight switch. The beam cut through darkness, illuminating the tunnel ahead. He stood 15 feet away, not the skeletal remains I'd expected, but nearly intact. A man in his mid-30s wearing muddy hiking clothes, dark hair plastered to his forehead, wire-rimmed glasses askew on a face that retained most of its features. Only his eyes revealed the truth. Not empty sockets like the older miners, but milky orbs that reflected my light with an unnatural sheen. "You know my name," he said. His lips moved normally, but the voice emerged wrong, like someone speaking through water. "You signed the logbook." He tilted his head, the gesture unsettlingly similar to Harkin's. "I maintain my rounds. Professional courtesy." I kept the flashlight trained on him, noting details. His hiking boots were caked with the same clay that formed the tunnel floor. His jacket, once blue, now gray with coal dust, bore a university logo partially obscured by dark stains. His right hand clutched something small and rectangular, a voice recorder. "What happened to you, Professor?" I asked, taking a measured step forward. "I found it." His free hand gestured deeper into the tunnel. "What they've been hiding. What they've always been hiding." He raised the voice recorder. "It's all documented, all the evidence." I took another step. Evidence of what? The chamber. His milky eyes fixed on me with disturbing intensity. They're all there. Not just the 78 crew, all of them. Every disappearance, every accident, they never left. Something in his tone raised the hairs on my neck. Not just the unnatural quality, but the fervor beneath it, the academic's excitement. "Show me," I said. Crawford turned without hesitation, moving deeper into the tunnel with a gait that wasn't quite right. Too fluid in places, too stiff in others. I followed, maintaining 10 feet of distance, one hand on the flashlight and the other near the pouch of salt and iron at my belt. The tunnel continued its descent for another 100 yards before opening into a larger space. My light couldn't reach the far walls or ceiling, creating the impression of stepping into a void. The floor sloped downward toward a central depression filled with standing water, black and still as oil. "There," Crawford said, pointing across the water to a narrow opening in the far wall. "The chamber." I swept my light around the perimeter, looking for a path. Ancient wooden walkways clung to the walls, most rotted through in places. No safe crossing. "How do we reach it?" Crawford turned to me, something shifting behind his milky eyes. "We walk. The water isn't deep." "How do you know?" "I crossed it." He gestured to his soaked clothing. 6 months, 2 weeks, 3 days ago." The precision sent a chill through me that had nothing to do with the temperature. "And you found the chamber on the other side." "I found the truth." He stepped toward the water's edge. "Come. See for yourself." I hesitated. Everything about this felt wrong. The isolated location, the still water. Crawford's unnatural movements and fixation on showing me the chamber. I thought about Robert's warning. Whatever's wearing Crawford's face isn't him anymore. "I need to report back first," I said, reaching for my radio despite knowing it wouldn't transmit. Crawford's expression changed, subtle but unmistakable. Disappointment. Then calculation. "Of course," he said too smoothly. "Protocol. I understand protocol." He took a step toward me, then another, closing the distance. His movements accelerated, becoming more fluid, less human. The voice recorder fell from his hand, clattering against stone. "You should see the chamber," he said, now 5 feet away. "Everyone should see what's waiting there." I backed toward the tunnel entrance, flashlight still trained on him. That's not necessary, Professor. It is. 3 feet now. They're waiting. All of them. They sent me to bring someone. His hand extended toward me, fingers too long, joints bending at impossible angles, not decomposed like the older miners, but transformed, adapted. I reached into my belt pouch, grabbing a handful of the salt mixture. Stop where you are. Crawford's face split into a smile too wide for human muscles. The others can't leave the tunnels. Too decayed, too tied to where they died. Another step. But I'm fresh. I can go anywhere. I threw the salt in an arc between us. It scattered across the stone floor, forming an uneven line. Crawford stopped at its edge, his unnatural smile faltering. Iron and salt, he said, recognizing the barrier. Old protection. Oldest there is, I agreed, taking another step back. Crawford's head tilted at that impossible angle. You've been talking to Kelly. He doesn't understand what's happening here, what's been happening for decades. Explain it to me. The thing wearing Crawford's face studied me, those milky eyes calculating. The chamber first, then explanations. I glanced at my watch, 12:49. Hours until dawn. No radio contact possible, no backup coming. One question first, I said. Did you follow the rules? Crawford's expression flickered. Confusion, then recognition. Kelly's rules? The little card? 4 rules. Simple ones. I was here for research, not superstition. His tone carried academic dismissal. I kept my notebooks, my recorder, my equipment. I documented everything methodically. But you didn't follow the rules. I didn't need... He stopped, something like understanding crossing his features. The helmet. I removed my helmet when the light failed. Needed to change the batteries. His voice softened, became more human, tinged with regret. That's when they found me. I added more salt to the line between us, reinforcing the barrier. And now you're one of them. Not exactly. Crawford took a half step back from the salt line. They're remnants, echoes. I'm still processing, transitioning. His gaze shifted to the black water. They're waiting for me to bring someone back, someone living. Understanding clicked into place. They sent you to find a replacement, someone to take your place while you fully transition. Crawford didn't deny it. It doesn't hurt, not after the initial shock. His voice had taken on a persuasive quality, almost soothing. You just let go. Accept the darkness. Become part of something ancient. I backed toward the tunnel, maintaining the salt barrier between us. I'm going to leave now, Professor. I suggest you stay here. His expression hardened instantly. You can't leave. None of us can leave. That's the rule. Not my rule. I continued backing away, one careful step at a time. Crawford's form blurred suddenly, becoming less solid, more shadow than substance. He moved toward the salt line, hovering at its edge. The rules don't matter, he said, voice dropping to a hollow whisper. Not to me. Not anymore. He stepped across the salt barrier as though it wasn't there. I fumbled for more salt, scattering it in a hasty arc that Crawford simply passed through. Whatever protection worked on the older spirits had limited effect on him. I turned and ran, boots slipping on damp stone as I fled up the sloping tunnel. Crawford moved with unnatural speed, a blur of motion in my peripheral vision. I reached checkpoint 3, fumbling with the flashlight while trying to maintain my footing. The beam caught something moving to my left. Not Crawford, but other shapes emerging from the darkness. The older miners, drawn by the commotion. Harkins among them, his skeletal form blocking the path back to the surface. Trapped between Crawford and the others, I made the only choice available. I ducked into the left tunnel, the one leading to the 1952 collapse. According to the map, It dead-ended at a rockfall 70 yards in, but it was my only option. The tunnel narrowed quickly, ceiling dropping to where I had to crouch. Support beams sagged dangerously, creaking under the mountain's weight. My light caught the collapsed section ahead, a wall of jumbled rock and splintered timber blocking the passage completely. Footsteps approached from behind, not the shuffling gait of skeletal miners, but Crawford's more fluid movement. I pressed my back against the rockfall, searching for options. My light beam caught something to my left, a narrow gap between the collapsed material and the tunnel wall, barely 18 inches wide. I squeezed through sideways, scraping against jagged stone, helmet light illuminating a small pocket beyond. Not a dead end. The collapse had created a diagonal barrier, leaving a triangular space behind it, where the tunnel continued. Crawford's voice echoed from the main passage. "There's nowhere to go. The tunnel collapsed." I pushed through completely, finding myself in a section of tunnel untouched since 1952. Ancient tools lay where they'd fallen. A broken lantern, a lunch pail dented on one side, and against the far wall, the remains of miners who'd died here. 3 skeletal figures huddled together, partially buried by fallen debris. Unlike the wandering spirits, these remains were physical. Bones still clothed in rotted fabric, helmets still strapped in place. They hadn't joined the others roaming the tunnels. They'd stayed with their bodies. Crawford appeared at the narrow gap, his form compressing unnaturally as he began squeezing through. "I found you." I backed deeper into the pocket, scanning for another exit. Nothing. Just the 3 sets of remains and the tools scattered around them. One of the miners still clutched something in his skeletal hand, a small metal container. I pried it loose, recognizing an old-fashioned powder flask for black blasting powder. Crawford emerged from the gap, his form re-solidifying as he straightened. "The chamber is waiting. They're all waiting." I unscrewed the flask cap, finding the powder inside still dry after all these decades, protected by the sealed container. Backing toward the skeletal miners, I reached into my belt pouch for the matches I carried for emergency lighting. "You don't want to do this," Crawford said, advancing slowly. "You don't want to end up like them." He gestured to the remains behind me. "They stayed together," I said, noting how the 3 miners had died side by side, one's arm still around another's shoulders. "They didn't become what you are." Crawford's expression twisted. "They didn't have a choice. I did. I chose knowledge over ignorance. You chose wrong." I struck the match against the wall, the sudden flare momentarily blinding in the darkness. "Fire in the hole," I whispered, the old miner's warning, and dropped the lit match into the powder flask. I threw the flask toward the gap as Crawford lunged forward. The powder ignited with a sharp crack and bright flash, catching the ancient timber supports. Dry wood from half a century ago burned readily, flames spreading to the rotted support beams. Crawford shrieked, not in pain but rage, as fire filled the narrow space between us. The older timbers along the ceiling began to smolder, then crack under the weight they'd held for decades. "You can't collapse it again," Crawford shouted through the growing flames. "You'll be trapped too." He was right. I'd sealed.